On the morning of May 5th, 1961, all systems were go for America. On that day, in the early dawn, people throughout the world were watching and hoping. Even after unprecedented engineering and testing programs, not one person could be sure that this man could fly this craft into space and return safely to the Earth. These were tense moments in the early 60s. The risks were great, but they were well taken. The eyes of America and the world watched as Alan Shepard and those thousands who stood beside him made the dream of American manned spaceflight a reality.
Ignition, liftoff, and 34 minutes after the hour.
After that historic flight, another man of vision and courage, President John Kennedy, set America on a course to the moon.
That we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept. The founder and the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people.
In the brilliance of the lunar success, it is easy to forget those small daily triumphs that were our first steps. On Earth, the first astronauts trained in simulators to master machines more complex than the wildest imaginings of science fiction. As their experience and abilities grew, space became less an unknown void and more a new ocean to be sailed. Worldwide tracking stations had to be established that would circle the globe and make possible communication with spacecraft in orbit. People had to be trained to a high level of competence to operate these widespread links in the thread of communication that stretched far into space. With their cameras, the astronauts became the eyes of all people, looking at their world from a new perspective. Our early views of the Earth from space revealed an unexpected and incomparable beauty. These were days of new hope and confidence. In the final Mercury flight, astronaut Gordon Cooper controlled re-entry by hand and splashed down only 8,700 yards from the prime recovery vessel. America was going to the moon, and every flight brought nearer that ultimate goal. Project Gemini, with spacecraft large enough for 2 astronauts, was America's next step into space. Many questions remained along the pathway to the moon. Could man walk outside his spacecraft and work in space? Gemini flights proved he could. Could two spacecraft rendezvous in space? They maneuvered within feet of each other in Project Gemini. In fact, these space travelers lived in space 2 weeks, eating, sleeping, and working without ever leaving their spacecraft. Long-duration flight would be necessary for a mission to the moon. Fuel cells were used on these missions because conventional batteries would not be adequate for the long journey to the moon. Someday, fuel cells may be used on Earth to provide power to our homes and automobiles. Docking one spacecraft with another would be a primary requirement for the lunar journey. In Project Gemini, the spacecraft was docked with a target vehicle. The propulsion system of the target vehicle was fired to boost the docked spacecraft to a record orbit of 741 nautical miles, and a view of Earth no one had seen before.
The world is round. You got a good view? I mean, it's spectacular.
The base of experience gained in Mercury was refined and extended in Gemini. Everyone in the program knew their job and performed it well. This government and industry team would form the nucleus of expertise required to go to the moon and contribute greatly to new approaches in the management of large projects. Gemini astronauts served science as well as technology. These unique photographs show the ultraviolet air glow phenomenon that is visible from space. Through these pictures, scientists gain new insights into the composition and characteristics of our upper atmosphere. Re-entry flight path control was an important prerequisite for a lunar mission. Returning from the moon at 25,000 miles an hour, spacecraft re-entry must be controlled within 2 degrees. The Gemini spacecraft was designed to be maneuvered to that degree of accuracy, and the Gemini flights proved the success of this technique. The Gemini program built upon the foundation of Mercury, adding new experience to the bank of knowledge and new capabilities to the body of technology that would take America to the moon. At the conclusion of Project Gemini, over 2,400 photographs of the Earth had been taken from orbit. 2,000 of these photographs were used by scientists, geologists, and cartographers throughout the world to vastly increase their understanding of our planet. Fundamental questions about the abilities of man and his spacecraft had been answered, and the 12 flights of Gemini had given us the experience and confidence to take that next step into space. Project Apollo, the immensity of the launch vehicle equaled the enormity of the journey. Every part of this nearly 6 million pound vehicle had been tested and retested, verified and checked. Even before it left the launch pad, this was one of the greatest technological accomplishments in the history of the world. A skilled government industry team had been refined and strengthened throughout early programs to the greatest levels of proficiency in Apollo. Advanced management techniques were developed that have increased cost effectiveness in both government and industry. These same techniques may be used to solve some of our nation's most pressing problems.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The world watched Apollo missions on television as the explorers from Earth searched the surface for geological data that would help in understanding the early history of our planet and solar system. More and more emphasis was placed on scientific activities on the moon. complex experiments were placed that would continue to send back signals from the moon long after the last Apollo flight had returned home. Today, these signals are still expanding the base of lunar science, as well as increasing the knowledge of our home planet. Experiments such as these could result in increased accuracy in the prediction of earthquakes and increased understanding of the movement of continents on Earth. Lunar explorers took samples from the moon so that later scientists on Earth could analyze its composition and learn more about our nearest neighbor in space. America's last Apollo astronaut to leave the moon had an appropriate comment.
America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow.
We had already begun our tomorrow. After the long odyssey to the moon, men began to realize that we had seen more than another celestial body. We had seen our own Earth in a way never seen before, as a traveler in space would see it, blue and white and inviting. The worldwide ecology movement dates its beginnings of popular support to pictures like these that show the Earth as a fragile envelope of life in the cold void of space. As we looked closer, we realized there were things to be learned, things to be done nearer to home. Project Skylab, a continuation of the Apollo program and America's first space station, was designed to learn and do those things in near-Earth space that the technology generated by the lunar program had made possible. Large-scale launch vehicles had been proven. Man's viability in space had been established, and previous experience had provided us with the capability to send men to live and work for long periods in space. 147 principal investigators from the world over participated in the scientific accomplishments of Skylab. Skylab was made largely of equipment designed for the Apollo program. The orbital workshop itself was built from an unused third stage of the Saturn V launch vehicle. Returns to science were even greater than had been expected. The giant telescopes aboard Skylab had revealed mysteries of the sun that had been concealed for all recorded history by the dense, blanketing atmosphere of the Earth. Pictures like these show faces of the sun never seen before and may contribute to the use of the sun as a limitless, pollution-free source of energy on Earth. Successful experiments were conducted which proved the feasibility of enlarged crystal growth in zero gravity. This could result in greatly improved reliability and miniaturization of sophisticated electronic devices. Pictures of the Earth from Skylab have proven invaluable in locating water and vital mineral resources that would have remained unseen from the surface. For years to come, these orbital photographs may provide solutions to transportation problems by improving shipping routes, solutions to land management problems in the United States and in other countries, and the increased understanding of our oceans and atmosphere. But perhaps the most important contribution of Skylab is the realization that there is no recognizable limit to man's ability to live, to learn, and to produce in space. Man has made this new world his home. Skylab orbits the Earth silently now, its systems powered down. The last astronauts have returned to Earth. But it has shown us that near-Earth space is a resource to be used for the betterment of man. And the international cooperation engendered will hopefully increase and extend to other ventures in space. The final flight for Apollo hardware was the Apollo-Soyuz mission. This mission joined a spacecraft from the USSR with one from the United States. The Soviet Union and United States developed a compatible docking system to be tested on this flight that could be used for international rescue missions and for joint scientific research. American astronauts, Soviet cosmonauts, and their support teams trained for 2 years for this historic flight in both the Soviet Union and the United States. America and the world have come a long way since those early days in space. The spirit of this project lends hope that space can be used for the benefit of all people as an example of peaceful cooperation. For the first time, American astronauts prepared to work in space with cosmonauts from the USSR. On the morning of the mission, final preparations for the flight were being completed. Halfway around the world, the USSR cosmonauts were ready for their rendezvous in space.
Engine start. 1, 0. Launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust. Moving out. Clear the tower.
Roger, tower clear.
Roger, Tom, you got good thrust on all engines. You're right on the money.
30 seconds and we're on the way.
Stand by for mode 1 Bravo. Mark, 1 Bravo.
1 Bravo, 2 Gs.
Roger.
And cabin pressure's coming down.
Roger.
Apollo Houston, Moscow is go for docking. Houston
After
is go for
launch,
docking.
each crew concentrated on completing its schedule of tasks before the historic docking. When all was ready and the time had come, people throughout the world watched as the Apollo spacecraft docked with the Soyuz in a flawless sequence of maneuvers that was the culmination of many months and years of planning and effort.
Soyuz Apollo, track switches.
I need you 5x5. Hello, Houston.
Can you see the Soyuz?
Here he comes, just above the docking module. Looks real pretty.
Soyuz docking system is ready.
Good show. Let's say that. Looking fine.
Coming, Tom.
I am approaching Soyuz.
Tom, please don't forget about your engine.
Less than 5 meters distance.
3 meters.
3 meters.
13 meters.
1 meter. Contact. Capture.
Roger,
All right, auto show. Hawk value loop 3.
Okay, the camera.
Aha! Strastic. Got it? Okay, it'll stay open.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Lexi. Mr. Mullet. Glad to see you. Here.
The Lexi. Очень рад видеть вас.
Очень рад. Это роща день. Советский Союз. Соединенных Штатов. Флага вашему правительству и народу Советского Союза. Пусть Наша совместная работа в космосе пойдет на благо всех стран и народов на Земле.
The friendship that had begun while on Earth, preparing for the mission, grew in space and formed the foundation of the cooperative spirit that helped make the mission a success. With the final flight of an Apollo spacecraft, an era is formally brought to a close. But a new age was already born, an age of international cooperation and of the use of our most abundant natural resource, space. On this new ocean, America will use a versatile and economical spacefaring vehicle, the Space Shuttle. The reusable Space Shuttle vehicles are designed to fly up to 60 missions a year. They will be launched like a rocket and land like an airplane. The large payload bay will accommodate everything from many small satellites to full-size manned laboratories that may operate for weeks in Earth orbit. Satellites may be placed in orbit and returned to Earth, or even repaired in orbit with this multi-purpose craft. The Space Shuttle has evolved from the foundations of early programs and utilizes the advanced technology and management techniques developed in Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab. Assembly of the Space Shuttle is performed at the Rockwell International Facility at Palmdale, California. Components of the Space Shuttle are brought here for final installation from over 300 subcontractor locations across the country. The shuttle will be flown in approach and landing tests in 1977. The first manned orbital flight is scheduled for 1979. While the Space Shuttle is being built in the United States, work is progressing on the Space Lab, which will be carried in the shuttle payload bay. The Space Lab is being developed, built, and funded by a consortium of European nations to furnish a shirt-sleeve laboratory in space for a wide range of scientific and industrial applications. When completed in 1979, the Space Lab will enable investigators to accompany their experiments into space, operate them, and return to Earth with their data. Nominal missions of up to a week or special missions of up to a month are planned for the Space Lab. The experiment racks are removable for utmost flexibility of use, and each one will be tailored and outfitted for each specific mission being flown. Realistic simulations are already being conducted at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This simulated mission follows a normal mission timeline for a week of orbital operations for a life sciences payload in the Space Lab. The crew members live in a mock-up of the shuttle forward section just as they would on an actual mission. The experiments performed in this simulation will provide information concerning the allocation of space and hardware for the tasks being performed, and also provide a comparison of Earth-based data to compare with results obtained in zero gravity. Launch costs for the space transportation system will be reduced to a fraction of those of previous expendable vehicles because the shuttle will be reusable. The fields of science, commerce, and industry will be greatly advanced by the capability of the space shuttle to carry a variety of payloads. Being able to work routinely in the weightlessness of space will provide opportunities for the production of new alloys and the development of new medical techniques and vaccines. It will enable us to study our oceans and atmosphere, and, perhaps more importantly, will suggest uses far beyond our present vision. Tomorrow, all nations may work together in space for the benefit of mankind. In the words of John Kennedy, there is still new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won for the progress of all people. Those first steps, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab, opened the door to space. Today, we stand on the threshold of opportunity.
Over 3 billion years ago, life first appeared in the seas of an infant Earth. Over 400 million years ago, living creatures left the protective waters to begin life on land. About 2 million years ago, the earliest man walked upright on the land. 204 years ago, James Watt made improvements to the steam engine and began the age of technology, forever altering the course of man. 66 years ago, two men named Wright again changed the pattern of life on this planet. Today, men first left the protective atmosphere of Earth to walk in the vacuum of the moon. And we may wonder, will our lives ever be the same? Will future generations look back from the Earth, from another planet, from another star, and say, this was the beginning? Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Buzz Aldrin. 3 men to represent the culmination of a dream and the beginning of a new concept of reality.
through the atmosphere toward the open vacuum. A trip not only through space, but through time. Toward a world untouched by the evolutionary processes of Earth. A journey that was to be a door to the future and a window on the past. Now in Earth orbit, it was time for translunar injection, the start of the trip out.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Slightly less than 1 minute to ignition, and everything is go. Roger. Ignition. We confirm ignition, and the thrust is go.
The burn completed, on their way to the moon. The next step was to jettison their launch vehicle, turn around and dock with the lunar module. Still pulling free now of the useless third stage, they continue their coasting flight.
Hi, Houston, Apollo 11. How many miles out do you have us now? Roughly about 50,000. A beautiful sight.
So they coasted toward the moon. As Jason sought the Golden Fleece to regain a kingdom, these three sought a cargo of knowledge to gain a kingdom for all men, a kingdom of infinite frontier. Then on July 19th, 1969, Apollo 11 prepared for LOI, Lunar Orbit Insertion.
11, this is Houston. You are go for LOI, over. Roger, go for LOI. And we've had loss of signal as Apollo 11 goes behind the moon.
Now those of us on the Earth waited for the radio signal to be acquired as Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin emerged from their first transit behind the moon.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. How do you read? Reading you loud and clear, Houston. How are you?
As the Eagle rotated slowly, Collins inspected it carefully, for now it was time for the descent to the surface of the moon and into history.
Eagle, Houston, we're all go. How does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger. Looking good. Roger, Neil.
A separation maneuver had placed the command module below the Eagle, so that half an orbit later, there would be a safe clearance for DOI, Descent Orbit Insertion. Armstrong and Aldrin looked down at Columbia as they passed over the landing site.
Eagle, Houston, you're a go for DOI, over. Roger, go for DOI. Do you have LOS and AOS on? Roger. Both looking good, going over the hill.
Again, Eagle and Columbia passed behind the moon. When they emerged, Eagle would be on the way down, awaiting the signal that would begin the powered descent and end with man's first lunar landing.
Eagle, Houston, we rig you now. You're a go for PDI, over. Roger, understand. That's the Earth, right out our front window.
50,000 feet above the moon, Eagle's descent engine ignited and began the deceleration for landing. As they descended, Armstrong and Aldrin watched the craters and mountains of the moon pass beneath them.
You're a go for landing, over. Roger, understand. Go for landing.
At this point, the Eagle rolled onto its back to give the landing radar surface acquisition. Now the crew was flying blind, hurtling toward the lunar surface. Only their instruments and the voice of mission control telling them where they were, until the slow pitch maneuver brought the lunar horizon to their view.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. How many bites? Okay, 75 feet. That's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward.
And to Mike Collins, alone in the orbiting Columbia.
Eagle, is that Tranquility, over?
Yeah, I heard the whole thing.
Well, good show. Tranquility, be advised there are lots of smiling faces in this room and all over the world, over. Well, there are 2 of them up here. Roger, it was a beautiful job, you guys.
And don't forget one in the command module.
Roger. Now, we'll get to the details of what's around here, but it looks like a collection of just about every variety of shape, angularity, granularity, but every variety of rock you could find. There doesn't appear to be too much of a general color at all. We see some angular blocks out several hundred feet in front of us that are probably 2 feet in size and have angular edges.
Now in the lesser gravity of the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin donned their equipment and prepared to explore this stark, lonely world.
Do you think you can open the hatch at this pressure, about 0.12 psi? We're going to try it. Roger. The hatch is coming open.
Guided by Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong in his bulky suit worked his way through the Eagle's forward hatch.
How am I doing? You're doing fine. Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch. Roger, Neil. And we're getting a picture on the TV. Step off the lamp now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for man.
be no difficulty in moving around as we suspected. It's even perhaps easier than the simulations of 16G that we performed in various simulations on the ground. Absolutely no trouble to walk around.
Oh, that looks beautiful from radio.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of
Then it was time for Aldrin to join him.
Are you ready?
all set.
I want to back up and partially close that. Making sure not to lock it on my way out.
Particularly good thought.
That's our home for the next couple hours. We want to take good care of it.
There you go.
Okay, now I think I'll do the same.
There you got it. That's a good step. Yep. About a 3-footer.
Beautiful view.
Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Isn't it fun?
Then the first man on the moon read a plaque attached to a leg of the eagle. A plaque representing the philosophy of a nation that itself, less than 2 centuries earlier, had been thought by many so-called practical men an impractical dream.
Underneath it says, "Dear men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace for all mankind." It has the crew members' signatures and the signature of the President of the United States.
And as we watched them plant the flag of the United States in the lunar soil, we perhaps wondered, what dream dreamt today by what impractical dreamer will be tomorrow's reality?
Columbia, this is Houston, reading you loud and clear, over.
Yeah, read you loud and clear. How's it going?
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike, it really is.
Oh, gee, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Now Buzz Aldrin developed the choreography for future lunar explorers, the steps with which those who follow will traverse the moon.
All right, you do have to be rather careful to keep track of where your center of mass is.
It was as though we peered through a lens that distorted time itself.
Houston, I don't think there's any hope for using this leveling device to come up with an accurate level. Roger, 11, press on. You believe the ball is right in the middle now. Wonderful. Take a picture before it moves.
So they went about their tasks of exploration. Aliens on a distant world. And, strangely enough, they looked as if they belonged there.
Buzz, this is Houston. You have approximately 3 minutes until you must commence your EVA termination activity. Roger, understand.
It was now time to leave the dusty lunar plain, stow the experiment, samples, and photographs to be returned to Earth.
Okay, now just close and latch.
Alone in Columbia, Mike Collins watched the Eagle's climb, its flashing beacon of friendly signal. For hours he had kept his vigil. Now his companions were returning. Control thrusters firing, Eagle and Columbia moved together for docking, the last movement of their lunar duet. After the docking, the transfer of the crew and their precious samples of the moon to Columbia, the ascent stage of the Eagle was jettisoned. It was time for the final burn in lunar orbit. Trans-Earth injection. TEI. Again, we waited. Waited for Apollo 11 to emerge from behind the moon. Coming home.
Hello, Apollo 11, Houston. How did it go? Over.
Time to open up the LRL doors, Charlie.
Roger. We got you coming home.
On the way home. Neil Armstrong, Mike Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. Then, on July 24th, the crew of Apollo 11 witnessed a final sunset over Earth's horizon and prepared for entry.
You're cleared for landing. Roger, gears down and locked. See you later.
how the three men wearing biological isolation garments entered the mobile quarantine facility and their earthly confinement.
Neil, Buzz, and Mike, I want you to know that I think I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I say this not only because I have the honor to be President of the United States, but particularly because I have the privilege of speaking for so many and welcoming you back to Earth. As a result of what you've done, the world's never been closer together before. And we just thank you for that.
In reaching out for the moon, man had touched his destiny. But to attain that destiny, we must take firm hold of that which we now only touch, then reach again. For these men, the first, were only the first. From the moon, Earth exists as a warm, colorful sanctuary in the airless black of space. But in our planetary system, Earth is the anomaly, the strange environment. And now it is time. Time for man to break free of his provincial planet, to expand physically and mentally into the future, into the universe, into reality. And this was the beginning.
RCU windows are clear. MC circuit is 4243. Gas and pressure light, a 3 amp light, and an ECS light.
Yeah, and we got a water separator light.
No water, all set.
All right. Telcom flight.
That sounds good, Flight.
All right.
Go ahead, Flight.
Was talking to Telcom.
Go, Flight.
I copy. The lights are good, right?
Roger.
EMU flight.
Go ahead, Flight.
Look okay to you?
Yes, the LMP's taken an awful long time to get everything performing properly. Yet an awful lot of heat load in that loop. It'd be a few minutes yet.
Am I right? Is number one the CDR?
Number one is CDR and number two is LMP. He's there now. His feed water pressure's up.
Roger.
Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch.
Roger, Neil.
LOS call Columbia. Capcom, all go. Okay, stand by, Neil.
Columbia, this is Houston. 1 minute, 30 seconds to LOS. All systems go.
Okay, everything's nice and straight in here.
Okay, can you pull the door open a little more?
Right?
Okay.
Did you get the Mesa out?
I'm going to pull it now.
LOS Columbia.
Roger.
Houston, the Mesa came down. All right.
Houston, Roger, we copy, and we're standing by for your TV.
Flight Telcom, you should turn the TV circuit breaker in.
TV circuit breaker in.
Neil, this is Houston, loud and clear. Break. Buzz, this is Houston. Radio check and verify TV circuit breaker in.
Roger, TV circuit breaker's in.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.
You got a good picture, huh?
There's a great deal of contrast in it, and currently it's upside down on our monitor, but we can make out a fair amount of detail. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Neil, we can see you coming. Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. That isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up. Roger, we copy. It's a pretty good little jump.
Surgeon from flight.
Go flight.
How do you look?
We're looking fine. Flight data's good. Crew's doing well.
Is the camera installed on the RCU bracket?
Capcom flight.
Good flight.
I'm not sure he copied that.
Neil, this is Houston. Did you copy about the contingency sample? Over. All right, you're going to get to that just as soon as they finish these picture series.
Fair enough. Like it's a little difficult to dig through the initial crust.
Very interesting. It's a very soft surface, but here and there where I plug with the contingency sample collector, I run into very hard surface, but it appears to be very cohesive material of the same sort. I'll try to get a rock in here.
Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil.
It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
Neil is now unveiling the plaque that is.
Roger, we got you bore-sighted, but back to one side.
Bore-sighted.